All right, now I'm asking anyone that has skipped to this video without listening to the one before, because I read some dictionary definitions that were really important for you to completely understand before I get into this Gosho. So please do me the favor of watching the previous video before you decide to just jump into this one and listen, okay? Because this is going to be a little bit out there in that it's written to Sai Rinpo, so it's written to somebody that already has mastered Buddhism and understands a lot of stuff that you're not going to, that I sure didn't until I looked it all up. Just again, try your very best to take whatever questions you have about what this Gosho says to the Gohonzon. If you do that rather than relying on me, rely on your own Buddhahood. You have a Buddha nature that will express this to you correctly if you sincerely seek it to. All right? And so, On Prayer starts on page 336 of volume 1. Its background is on page 350. So it's only going to be about 14 pages. I'll read the background first, as I always do. As I said, I'm not going to be doing anything more than pretty much trying to read this and explain anything that I think that I can. But I'm not lecturing on the Gosho on Prayer. I'm reading it to you. I'm making it available to you because you'll never read it. That's why I'm here. All right. Background, page 350. Prayers based on the Lotus Sutra will definitely be answered, writes Nichiren Daishonin. So, Andre, that's what started me on this whole thing. You know, this is all in response to my whole communication with you about the importance of faith. I'll say it again. Prayers based on the Lotus Sutra will definitely be answered, which says faith is important, which says faith is necessary, writes Nichiren Daishonin. In contrast, he emphasizes prayers based on mistaken teachings, like the practice of daimoku, or making stuff up as you go along, or making things that you have conform for your convenience, rather than maintaining a strict adherence to the teaching, okay, In contrast, he emphasizes prayers based on mistaken teachings not only will go unanswered, but will create suffering, both for those who offer them and for those on whose behalf they do so. All right? Now that's Nichiren Daishonin making that comment and making that declarative. And I'm not qualified to do anything but say, okay, thanks, brother, for letting me know. So I watch my stuff here.
Right.
This is the theme of On Prayer, written by Nichiren Daishonin in the 9th year of Brunei. Okay, so you can already tell this is going to be kind of a strict Gosho. When he was in exile on Sado Island. So now again, he wrote this just before he wrote Observation of the Observation of the Mind, the object of devotion for observing the mind in the 5th 500-year period following the Thus Come One's passing. Okay, that's the Gosho that he wrote after this one. He's writing it to Sai Rinpo, who he only met on Sado Island. He didn't know him before he got there, right? So this is somebody that he's already been able to perceive, will understand these very complex things that he hasn't even been able to really teach many of his disciples because they don't have the background to understand the theoretical aspect of Shakyamuni's teachings and how he's bringing it into the actual 3,000 realms of a single moment, in a single moment of life, the Buddhahood of the sowing in the latter day. So again, this is the theme of On Prayer. So let me start it again. Sorry. Prayers based on the Lotus Sutra will definitely be answered, writes Nichiren Daishonin. In contrast, he emphasizes prayers based on mistaken teachings not only will go unanswered, but will create suffering both for those who offer them and for those on whose behalf they do so. This is the theme of On Prayer, written by Nichiren Daishonin in the 9th year of Brunei when he was in exile on Sado Island. The writing is thought to be a reply to questions raised by Sai Rinpo, a disciple of the Daishonin and a former priest of the mountain Jikaku branch of the Tendai school, who at the time was also living in exile on Sado Island. Sai Rinpo and the Daishonin exchanged a number of letters concerning various important Buddhist doctrines. In this letter, the Daishonin distinguishes between the efficacy of prayer, how often what you pray for happens. The Daishonin distinguishes between the efficacy of prayer based on schools that prevailed in Japanese society of the day, including the flower garland, Dharma characteristics, precepts, true word, and Tendai schools, and prayer based on the Lotus Sutra. So he's really kind of comparing prayer based on all the other schools that all the temples are a part of, all the teachings outside of my teaching of Buddhism of sowing is what he's really talking about, because he's even talking about Mount Hay East, even talking about Dengyo's original temple. Okay, the authorities of the contemporary imperial court and shogunate relied to a great degree upon the teaching and prayers of the true word, Tendai, Zen, and Nembutsu schools, which the four dictums, if you look up that name of that Gosho, on the four dictums, he qualifies, those are the four great evils, because they twist the correct understanding of Shakyamuni's teachings in the 500-year period and beyond, when the teachings of Shakyamuni have already become obscure and lost. And they're supposed to be embracing the great pure law, which none of them are looking for, because they're relying on teachings that are really for the former and the middle day. And because they're for the former and the middle day, they were to be left behind after the middle day had ended. And the Daishonin is saying is because of that, if you pray that way, you're going to make bad causes. You're not going to get the good effect you're praying for. You're going to get an effect that says, oh, you're going against Shakyamuni's teaching because you're embracing the teachings for the former and the middle day, rather than embracing the great pure law that's been prophesied by teaching that will become unobscured in the 500-year period. And Nichiren is saying that teaching is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and I can prove it to you. So this is going to be his predication of doctrinally why he's able to say what he says about the Buddhism sowing, and that the Lotus Sutra is actually now both essential and theoretical teaching are both to be considered theoretical, because Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is now the essential teaching. It is now the source of actual Ichinen Sanzen. And I hope I didn't lose anybody in that little preamble. It was because the prayers offered by the priests of the True Word and Tendai schools were ineffectual. They didn't save Japan from invasion by the Mongols. The Daishonin declares that the imperial forces were defeated in the Jokyu disturbance, which was an invasion by the Mongols. A struggle for power, the Jokyu disturbance was two clans, a struggle for power between the imperial court and the Kamakura shogunate in 1221. It's one of the two things that were invasion from outside and disturbance from within is what he said was going to come down. He prophesied on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land. Those two predictions are made in that Gosho, and now they've occurred, and that's why he's doing his full-blown thing as the Buddhism of sowing. Placing their trust in these schools, he says, the royal court, the court had requested that prayers be offered for its protection and victory, which didn't occur. The shogunate, the samurai guys are the ones that beat the emperors. Ultimately, however, despite such prayers, not only were the imperial forces defeated in battle, but 3 retired emperors were exiled in two distant islands. Thus concludes the Daishonin, such prayers do not simply go unanswered, they actually bring about misfortune. On the other hand, prayers based on the Lotus Sutra are true prayers, the Daishonin says. He then states the reason. All Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, people of the two vehicles, voice hearers and cause awakened ones, and human and heavenly beings present in the assembly of the Lotus Sutra feel a great sense of gratitude because they attained Buddhahood through the Sutra. They repay these debts of gratitude. To repay these debts of gratitude, they will certainly protect those who uphold the Lotus Sutra. He's saying that's the influence that creates this circumstance that allows all of your prayers to be answered if you practice the correct teaching of chanting. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The Daishonin mentions the Dragon King's daughter and the evil Devadatta in particular, noting that because their attainment of Buddhahood was considered an especially remarkable achievement, their debt of gratitude is correspondingly great. Thus he assures Sairenbo they too will never fail to guard the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra. The Daishonin also firmly refutes the statement made by Kobo, the founder of the True Word school in Japan, that's esoteric Buddhism, who claimed in his work, the Treatise on the 10 Stages of the Mind, same thing as Tibetan Buddhism, they're both esoteric, they're both secret teachings. The Treatise on the 10 Stages of the Mind, that the Mahavajracana Sutra ranks first, the Flower Garland second, and the Lotus Sutra third. To support his contention that the true word doctrines are misleading, the Daishonin cites this statement made by the Buddhas in the Lotus Sutra, by the Buddha in the Lotus Sutra. I have preached various sutras, and among those sutras, the Lotus is the foremost. The letters heading Nichiren the Shramana, and I might be pronouncing it's either Shramana or Shramana or Shramana, one of those three. There's a long A in there, there's two long A's in there, and I don't know which. The letters heading the Nichiren, the Shramana or Shramana of Japan expresses his conviction, Nichiren's qualifying, that he is truly a Shramana or seeker of the way, and that he is the votary of the Lotus Sutra. It expresses Nichiren's conviction of his real identity. And that's the same conviction I express in revealing my real identity. And he's opened the pathway for all of us to reveal our real identities. And our real identities, every single one of us, is a Buddha. Okay? So he says again, the letters heading Nichiren the Shramana of Japan expresses his conviction that he is truly a Shramana or seeker of the way, and that he is the votary of the Lotus Sutra. So a seeker of the way, that means you're having to make efforts to advance. You're not just taking it for granted and going through the motions. You're actually seeking. Okay? All right? Shakyamuni achieved enlightenment as a seeker of the way in India. In this sense, this designation can also be said to convey the Daishonin's conviction that he is the true Shramana of Japan, that he is the Buddha, and that he is the Buddha of the latter day of the law, as he will make those declaratives in the course of his teaching after Tatsunokuchi. In conclusion, the Daishonin urges Sairenbo to offer prayers based upon the correct doctrines of the Lotus Sutra and to fulfill his true potential as a human being by aspiring to attain Buddhahood. Not to just be a priest, but to attain Buddhahood. And now on back to page 136 or 336. On prayer, 336. Nichiren the Shramana of Japan. Going right into it as a question and answer thing. That's how he does a lot of stuff to Sairenbo that way. Okay, here we go. Question. Of the types of prayer that one offers based upon the teachings of the Flower Garland School, the Dharma Characteristics School, the Three Treatises School, the Three Hinayana Schools, the True Word School, or the Tendai School, which type is effective? Answer. Since they represent the preaching of the Buddha, they can all in some sense be considered prayer. But prayer that is based upon the Lotus Sutra is a prayer that is certain to be fulfilled. Question. What is the reason for that? The persons of the two vehicles, though they spent kalpas numerous as the dust particles of the land practicing the sutras that correspond to the four flavors, could never attain Buddhahood. The persons of learning and realization, voice hearers and cause awakened ones, could never attain Buddhahood. Okay? But by listening to the Lotus Sutra for just an instant, they became Buddhas. For this reason, Shariputra, Mahekashyapa, and the others who make up the 1,200 Arhats and the 12,000 Arhats and all others of the two vehicles who attain Buddhahood will certainly respond to the prayers of those who practice the Lotus Sutra, and they will take upon themselves the pains of such practitioners. Therefore, as it is stated in the Belief and Understanding chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the world-honored one in his great mercy makes use of a rare thing, in pity and compassion, teaching and converting, bringing benefit to us. in numberless millions of kalpas, who could ever repay him? Though we offer him our hands and feet, bow our heads in respectful obeisance, and present all manner of offerings, none of us could repay him. Though we lift him on the crown of our heads, bear him on our two shoulders, for kalpas numerous as Ganges sands, reverence him with all our hearts. Though we come with delicate foods, with countless jeweled robes, with articles of bedding, various kinds of potions and medicines, with oxhead sandalwood and all kinds of rare gems, construct memorial towers and spread the ground with jeweled robes. Though we were to do all of this by way of offerings for kalpas numerous as Ganges sands, we could not repay him. In this passage from the Sutra, the four great voice hearers, having heard the message of the simile and parable chapter and learned how they can become Buddhas, are expounding on how difficult it is to repay one's debt of gratitude to the Buddha and to the Lotus Sutra. Therefore, we can understand that to persons of the two vehicles, the practitioners of this sutra are more important than a father or a mother, than a beloved child, than their own two eyes or their body or in life itself. Because this is the sutra that says they too can become Buddhas. They are not scorched seeds. Though I do not think that the great voice hearers such as Shariputra and Madhyayana would actually cast aside a practitioner who praised any of the teachings put forth by the Buddha in the course of his lifetime, still it is likely that they feel a small degree of resentment toward the various sutras that were preached previous to the Lotus Sutra. This is because in them a strong warning has been given that within the Buddhist teachings, they, voice hearers, are like the seeds that have already been spoiled. But now these voice hearers have become thus come ones such as flower glow, rare form, and universal brightness. These are all prophesized identities Shakyamuni has bestowed upon the people of the two vehicles that are there at the ceremony. They've been told up to this time they'll never attain Buddhahood. They've scorched the seeds because they've been too focused on themselves. Shakyamuni says, no, you're going to be fine. You're going to be called this, this, and that, but it's going to happen sometime way down the road. Okay? All right. Okay, so he says, but now these voice hearers have come, thus come ones such, have become, thus come ones such as flower glow. Okay, these voice hearers have now become Buddhas, is what this is saying, such as flower glow, rare form, and universal brightness, a most unexpected stroke of good fortune. They must feel as though the Kulun mountains have split open, and they were able to enter those jewel-filled mountains. That is why the passage of appreciation says, this cluster of unsurpassed jewels has come to us unsought. You know, none of us know when we first start chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, we really can attain Buddhahood ourselves in this lifetime. So, there can be no doubt that all persons of the two vehicles will protect the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra. When he says practitioner of the Lotus Sutra, don't forget, in the latter day, the Lotus Sutra has already lost all of its influence. All right, so whenever Nichiren is saying through the practice of the Lotus Sutra, as he's talking to Sai Rinpo in this Gosho, which is occurring while he's on Sado Island under persecution from the authorities of the government. He's been sent there to go die. All right? He says, so there can be no doubt that all persons of the two vehicles will protect the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra. Even lowly creatures know enough to repay a debt of gratitude. That is why the passage of appreciation says this cluster of unsurpassed jewels has come to us unsought. That's what he's trying to explain to Sai Rinpo. Regardless of the teachings prior to now, you don't disregard them, you start to perceive them as from the perspective of the correct teaching, which is what I'm laying on you now as Nichiren. He says, so there can be no doubt that all persons of the two vehicles will protect the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra. Even and again, I was trying to explain that. The practitioner of the Lotus Sutra are those that chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. In the latter day of the law, to practice the Lotus Sutra, to be a practitioner of Lotus Sutra, means to be of the same mind as Nichiren. So when he says this of the Lotus Sutra over and over again, remember he's really talking about his teaching, which he qualifies is the Lotus Sutra. Okay, it's the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law. That's exactly what it is. It's the essence, which is all we need in the latter day of the law. Okay, so he's always talking about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo when he says this. Just be clear on that. And that's why I'm going to repeat the paragraph again. So there can be no doubt that all persons of the two vehicles will protect the practitioner that chants Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Even lowly creatures know enough to repay a debt of gratitude. Thus, everything that can be a protective influence protects those that chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Thus, the bird known as the wild goose will invariably carry out his filial duty to the mother bird when she is about to die. And the fox never forgets its old hillock. If even animals will do such things, then how much more so will this be true? Should this be true of human beings? A man named Wang Shao was traveling along a road when he became hungry and weary. Beside the road was a plum tree that was loaded with fruit. Wang Shao ate the fruit and thereby satisfied his hunger. But he said to himself, I have eaten the fruit of this plum tree and thus restored my strength and spirits. It would not be right if I failed to repay this debt of gratitude. So saying, he took off his robe and hung it on the plum tree before going on his way. A man named Wang Yin. Man, Wang is a good name, huh? A man named Wang Yin was traveling along a road when he became thirsty. Crossing a river, he drank some of the water, and then he tossed a coin into the river as payment for the water he had drunk. A dragon will invariably protect a monk who is wearing a Buddhist surplice. The reason is that a dragon once received a Buddhist surplice from the Buddha, and placing it around its beloved child in the dragon palace was able to prevent the child from being eaten by the Garuda birds. A Garuda bird will invariably protect one who acts with filial duty toward one's parents. Dragons would shake Mount Sumeru and eat the beloved chicks of the Garuda bird after they fell from their nests. But the Buddha instructed the Garuda bird to take the offerings of rice that Buddhist monks set aside from the alms given them by filial persons and to place these offerings on top of Mount Sumeru. In this way, the Garuda bird was able to prevent its chicks from being eaten by dragons. Heaven will invariably protect a person who observes the precepts and practices goodness. In the latter day of the law, that's attempting to express our Bodhisattva of the earth responsibilities of chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo with faith and teaching that to others. Heaven will invariably protect a person who observes the precepts, that's what I just talked about, and practices goodness. In the latter day of the law, that's what I just said. If people who are born into the human realm do not observe precepts or practice goodness, then when they die, they will, and again, when we talk about precepts, we practice the precept of the diamond chalice. We only have one precept as disciples of Nichiren. This isn't a bunch of Ten Commandment stuff here. If people who are born into the human realm do not observe the precepts or practice goodness, then when they die, they will in most cases be reborn in the realm of the Asura. And if those in the realm of the Asuras become very numerous, they will grow arrogant and will inevitably offend against heaven. However, if people who are born into the human realm observe the precepts and practice goodness, when they die, they will invariably be reborn in the realm of heavenly beings. And if those in the realm of heavenly beings become very numerous, the Asuras will be frightened and will not dare, continuing on page 338, to offend against heaven. That is the reason why heaven invariably protects people who observe the precepts and practice goodness. Persons of the two vehicles are more excellent in the virtue gained from their observance of the precepts and more astute in wisdom than ordinary people in the sixth paths. Therefore, how could they possibly ever abandon those who practice the Lotus Sutra, since the Lotus Sutra is the means that has enabled them to attain Buddhahood? Moreover, although the Bodhisattvas and ordinary people had practiced the teachings of the various sutras preached in the 40 and more years previous to the Lotus Sutra for a period of countless kalpas in order to become Buddhas, none ever succeeded. none ever succeeded in attaining Buddhahood. Moreover, although the Bodhisattvas and ordinary people had practiced the teachings of the various sutras preached in the 40 and more years previous to the Lotus Sutra, for a period of countless kalpas in order to become Buddhas, none ever succeeded in attaining Buddhahood. The only way to attain Buddhahood is to chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to the correct object of devotion and embrace the correct teaching. But they were able to attain Buddhahood by practicing the Lotus Sutra, by chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, by encountering Nichiren's Buddhism of sowing. All right? And now these Buddhas of the 10 directions of the 10 worlds are endowed with the 32 features and 80 characteristics that distinguish a Buddha and are looked up to by living beings in the other 9 realms, just as star clusters about the moon, as the 8 mountains surround Mount Sumeru, as the people of the 4 continents look up to the sun, or as common people look up to a wheel-turning king. And is the fact that these Buddhas are looked up to in this manner not due to the benefit and blessings of the Lotus Sutra? Therefore, in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha gives this warning. There is no need to enshrine the relics of the Buddha there. And the Nirvana Sutra says, what the Buddhas take as their teacher is the law. Therefore, the thus come ones honor, respect, and make offerings to it. In the passage from the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha is saying that his relics need not be enshrined in the stupa alongside the Lotus Sutra. And the passage from the Nirvana Sutra indicates that the Buddhas, plural, should honor, respect, and make offerings to the Lotus Sutra, the teaching that allowed them to become Buddhas. So I'm not giving you a lecture, but I'm saying, think of it this way. What the Buddhas take as their teacher is the law. Therefore, the thus come ones honor, respect, and make offerings to it, to the Lotus Sutra, not to the teacher Shakyamuni who taught from numberless major world system dust particle kalpas, but from the law that is the original state, which is what Nichiren qualifies Nam-myoho Renge-kyo actually is. So it's the law. He's now, okay, so in the passage from the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha is saying that his relics, so you don't need to pray to Shakyamuni, the guy, his bones or whatever. All right? We don't have to have some component of Nichiren's ashes that we practice to. All right? That innate state of life is already our original state as well. He's revealed it through his teaching of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the law. And so that's what we put in our stupa, our butsudan. That's what we embrace and show honor to, is not the teacher, but the law itself. Now, with the Buddhism of sowing, the person and the law are one, not just Nichiren and Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, but us and Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So understand that. The Buddha in your butsudan is your original state and one with the Buddha that exists in your living 9-world body. So, continuing at the bottom of page 338, the middle of the last paragraph, what the Buddhas take as their teacher is the law. Therefore, the thus come ones honor, respect, and make offerings to it. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. In the passage from the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha is saying that his relics need not be enshrined in the stupa alongside the Lotus Sutra, the teacher. And the passage from the Nirvana Sutra indicates that the Buddhas should honor, respect, and make offerings to the Lotus Sutra, to the teacher. The Buddhas, because they were enlightened by the Lotus Sutra, by the original teacher, were able to attain Buddhahood. Therefore, if they should fail to preach the sutra to others, so that's why we can't just practice for ourselves if we're really doing the real deal, they would be withholding from others the seeds of Buddhahood and would be committing a fault. Buddhas don't commit faults. For this reason, the thus come one Shakyamuni made his appearance in this Sahe world and prepared to preach it. But the devil king of the sixth heaven, otherwise known as the fundamental darkness, entered into the bodies of all the people and caused them to hate the Buddha and impede his teaching. He never was able to get to Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It wasn't his point, his purpose. Thus the king, known as Virudaka, killed 500 people of the Shakya clan. Angulimala chased after the Buddha. Devadatta rolled a huge stone down on him, and Chincha, the daughter of a Brahmin, tied a bowl to her belly and claimed to be pregnant with the Buddha's child. The lord of a Brahmin city proclaimed that a fine of 500 yo of gold should be levied against anyone who invited the Buddha into the city. As a result, the people of the city blocked the road with thorns, threw filth into the wells, built a barricade of spikes at the gate, and put poison in the Buddha's food, all because of their hatred of him. The nun Utpalavarna was murdered. Madhyayana was killed by Brahmins of the bamboo staff school, and Kalodayin was buried in horse dung, all because of animosity toward the Buddha. Nonetheless, the Buddha managed to survive these various ordeals, and at the age of 72, 42 years after he had begun preaching the Buddhist teachings at a mountain called Giridakuta, northeast of the city of Rajagira in central India, he began to preach the Lotus Sutra. He preached it for a period of 8 years. Then on the bank of the Ajitavati River at the city of Kushinagara in eastern India, in the middle of the night on the 15th day of the second month, when he was 80 years of age, he entered nirvana. His physical form ceased to exist. But before that, he had revealed his enlightenment in the form of the Lotus Sutra. Therefore, the words of this sutra are indeed the very soul of Shakyamuni, thus come one. And since every single word constitutes the soul of the Buddha Shakyamuni, thus come one, and since every single word constitutes the soul of the Buddha, Shakyamuni, thus come one, will protect those who practice this sutra as though he were protecting his very own eyes. He will accompany them just as a shadow accompanied a body. And then how could the prayers of such persons not be answered? So once again, what has been qualified up to now is that all of these entities that have somehow been able to attain the way all ultimately owe it to the Lotus Sutra. And therefore, they've already promised to be protective influences to those who uphold and embrace the sutra in the future. So Nichiren's qualifying this as the teaching, so that he's not saying, hey, it's not just because of me, even though I'm the one that's qualifying the correct teaching in the latter day. It's because everybody that's ever had anything to do with the Lotus Sutra all had the same intent and purpose. That was the former day. That was the middle day. Now is the latter day. There is no separation between them. Okay? And so continuing. The middle of page 339. During the first 40 and more years of the Buddha's teaching life, the various Bodhisattvas had tried to attain Buddhahood through the sutras, beginning with the Flower Garland Sutra, but they weren't able to do so. But when the Expedient Means chapter of Lotus Sutra was preached, announcing the concise replacement of the three vehicles with the one vehicle, then the Bodhisattvas seeking to be Buddhas in a great force of 80,000, as well as the wheel-turning kings who come from the 10,000s of millions of Pure Lands, all press their palms and with reverent minds wish to hear the teaching of perfect endowment. Okay, so you understand that, right? In the Expedient Means, when the Expedient Means chapter, the first chapter is he's in a samadhi, he's in a trance-like meditation. Okay, through all the way through I don't want to get off this, through the first of the threefold Lotus Sutra, the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra. Okay, the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, he doesn't say anything, somebody else is talking the whole time. Okay, then we get into the introduction chapter, which is chapter 1, which is saying all of these various different kinds of living beings. Some of them are Garuda, birds and dragons and whatever the hell else, in addition to human forms, okay, are there. And then the second one is when he starts to preach. Why is he preaching this sutra now? And that's when he starts to reveal the theoretical teaching of the theoretical Ichinen Sanzen that's contained in the first 14 chapters. Okay, are you with me? Mm-hmm. All right, so he says, so I'm going to reread that now you understand. Okay, during the first 40 and more years of the Buddha's teaching life, okay, so the various Bodhisattvas had tried to attain Buddhahood through the sutras, beginning with the Flower Garland Sutra, but they were unable to do so. In the first 40 years of his teaching life, none of what he had been able to say, that he had become enlightened to, was making anybody else enlightened. All right? He says, they tried to listen to those sutras and get Buddhahood out of it. They couldn't. But when the Expedient Means chapter of the Lotus Sutra was preached, announcing the concise replacement of the 3 vehicles with the 1 vehicle, that voice hearers, cause awakened ones, and bodhisattvas are just 3 phases of the same integral reality of Buddhahood. Okay, that's what he's talking about, the concise replacement of the 3 vehicles with the 1 vehicle. Then the bodhisattvas, the people that were in the 9th realm, not the cause awakened ones or voice hearers, because they were still in a pre-Nam-myoho Renge kind of a situation. The Bodhisattvas seeking to be Buddhas in a great force of 80,000, as well as the wheel-turning kings who come from 10,000s of millions of lands, all press their palms and with reverent minds wish to hear the teaching of perfect endowment. That's what he says I'm about to express in the Expedient Means chapter. And when, as a result, they heard the expanded replacement of the 3 vehicles with the 1 vehicle that's expounded in the Expedient Means chapter, then it was, as the sutra states, when the bodhisattvas hear this law, they will be released from all entanglements of doubt. They will therefore instantaneously become Buddhists. They will create a relationship that cannot be broken, that will ultimately lead them to the state of enlightenment. After that, bodhisattvas from this world, and from other regions assembled together like gathering clouds or so many stars. And when the Treasure Tower chapter was preached, which is still in the theoretical teaching, the Buddhas of the 10 directions gathered round, each accompanied by countless numbers of bodhisattvas. So this assembly starts with people that are all there in the assembly from earth, and then it keeps expanding. It keeps expanding because as he begins to preach this teaching, this is all in the Lotus Sutra. It's so everybody's been waiting everywhere to hear this. So all these Buddhists from all these worlds come to listen to him preach the Lotus Sutra, and all of the bodhisattvas whom they're teaching, everybody's got access. Okay, all right. After that, bodhisattvas from this world and from other regions assembled together like gathering clouds or so many stars to hear the Lotus Sutra be preached by Shakyamuni. And when the Treasure Tower chapter was preached, the Buddhas of the 10 directions gathered round. Now there's more Buddhas there, each accompanied by countless numbers of bodhisattvas. Manjushri appeared from the sea accompanied by countless bodhisattvas. In addition, there were the 800,000 million Nayutas of bodhisattvas, and the bodhisattvas more numerous than the sands of 8 Ganges rivers. The bodhisattvas as numerous as the dust particles of 1,000 worlds who emerged from the earth. That's the bodhisattvas of the earth. And the bodhisattvas numerous as the sands of 680 10,000s millions Nayutas of Ganges rivers who appear in the distinctions and benefits chapter. The bodhisattvas multiplied 1,000 times. The bodhisattvas as numerous as the dust particles of a world. The bodhisattvas as numerous as the dust particles of a major world system. The bodhisattvas as numerous as the dust particles of an intermediate world system. The bodhisattvas as numerous as the dust particles of a minor world system. The bodhisattvas as numerous as the dust particles of 4 continent worlds, or the dust particles of 3 4-continent worlds, 2 4-continent worlds, or 1 4-continent world, and the people as numerous as the dust particles of 8 worlds. There were 84,000 bodhisattvas of the Medicine King chapter, the 84,000 bodhisattvas and the 42,000 heavenly sons of the Wonderful Sound chapter, the 84,000 people of the Universal Gateway chapter, the 68,000 people of the Dharani chapter, the 84,000 people of the King Wonderful Adornment chapter, and the bodhisattvas as numerous as the Ganges sands, and the bodhisattvas as numerous as the dust particles of the major world system of the encouragements chapter. If we were to count up, that's a lot of bodhisattvas. If we were to count up all these bodhisattvas, they would be, and again, as bodhisattvas, they've already advanced to the stage where they're this close to Buddhahood. All right? They're way past human and heavenly beings. Okay? And become bodhisattvas the minute that they understood that as persons of learning and realization and cause awakened ones, they're also Buddhists, which makes them bodhisattvas right now, even though they haven't expressed Buddhahood. That's in their future, Shakyamuni says, because they're still learning in the theoretical teaching of the first half. If we counted all these dudes up, they would be as numerous as the dust particles of the worlds of the 10 directions, as the plants and trees in the worlds of the 10 directions, as the stars in the worlds of the 10 directions, or as the raindrops in the worlds of the 10 directions. All of these beings attained Buddhahood. All of these beings attained Buddhahood through the Lotus Sutra and are dwelling on the earth, under the earth, or in the sky of this present major world system. The Venerable Mahakashyapa lives on Mount Kukutapada. Manjushri lives on Mount Clear and Cool. Bodhisattva Earth Repository lives on Mount Karyadiya. Perceiver of the world's sounds lives on Mount Potalaka. And Bodhisattva Maitreya lives in the Tushita heaven. Nanda and the countless other dragon kings and Asura kings live in the bottom of the sea or at the seaside. Shakra lives in the heaven of the 33 gods. Brahma lives in the summit of being heaven. Maheshvara lives in the sixth heaven of freely enjoying things conjured by others. The four heavenly kings live on the slopes of Mount Sumeru, and the sun, the moon, and the crowds of stars appear before our eyes and shine over our heads. Pardon me. That's a long sentence. I'm not going to try and go back. I'll just continue. The river gods, the stream gods, the mountain gods. He's basically saying everything's involved in this. Yes. The river gods, the stream gods, and the mountain gods were all among the honored ones present at the assembly when the Lotus Sutra was preached. We'll get into that when we read the Lotus Sutra. All of these people, all of this is all, he's kind of doing a quick recap on the first chapters of the Lotus Sutra. It has now been over 2,200 years since the Buddha preached the Lotus Sutra. Human beings have a short lifespan, and therefore there are no persons alive today who have seen the Buddha with their own eyes. But in the heavenly realm, the span of a day is long, and the beings there have long lives. As a result, there are countless heavenly beings still alive who have seen the Buddha and listened to him preach the Lotus Sutra. 50 years in the life of a human being is equivalent to more than one day and one night in the lives of beings of the four heavenly kings. And these heavenly beings passing such days and nights, with 30 such days to a month and 12 such months to a year, live to be 500 years old. Therefore, 2,200 or more years in the lives of human beings will be equivalent to only 44 days in the lives of beings in the heaven of the four heavenly kings. 2,500 years, pardon me. Hence, from the point of view of the deities of the sun and the moon and the heavenly king Vajravana, it has been only 44 days or less than 2 months since the Buddha passed away. And from the point of view of Chakra and Brahma, not even a month, not even an hour has passed since the Buddha departed. In such a time, how could these heavenly beings have forgotten the vow that took in the presence of that they took in the presence of the Buddha, or the debt of gratitude that they owe to the sutra that allowed them to attain Buddhahood, and thus abandon the practitioners of the Lotus? And then, in such a short time, how could these heavenly beings have forgotten the vow that they took, which is to protect the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra? They took this vow in the presence of the Buddha, or the debt of gratitude that they owe to the sutra that allowed them to attain Buddhahood, and thus abandon the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra. So these entities could never not be present for our protection. When we think of it in this way, we can feel greatly assured. Therefore, we know that the prayers offered by a practitioner of the Lotus Sutra will be answered, just as an echo answers a sound, as a shadow follows a form, or as a reflection of the moon appears in clear water, as a mirror collects dewdrops, as a magnet attracts iron, as amber attracts particles of dust, or as a clear mirror reflects the color of an object. That paragraph just said, your prayer will never go unanswered, period. Concerning the ways of the ordinary, and he's already expressed why. It isn't just about you, okay? It isn't even just about us. It's about everything in the universe. Concerning the way of the ordinary world, though a man may not be inclined to a certain act, if he is urged to it by his parents, his sovereign, his teachers, his wife and children, or his close friends, and if he is a person of conscience, he will overlook his own inclinations and sacrifice his name and profit and even his life to perform that act. How much more earnest will he be then if the act is something that springs from his own heart? In such a case, even the restraints of his parents, his sovereign, or his teachers cannot prevent him from carrying out the action. Thus it was such that a worthy man named Fan Yuchii cut off his own head so that it could be presented to Ching Ko'o. And Chi Cha, having pledged to present his sword to the Lord of Su, hung it on the Lord's grave. Similarly, at the gathering on Eagle Peak, the Dragon King's daughter attained Buddhahood in her present form. In the Hinayana Sutras, women were despised because they are hindered by the thick clouds of the 5 obstacles and bound by the strong cords of the 3 obediences. And in the Mahayana Sutras, expounded in the first 40 and more years of the Buddha's preaching, women were rejected since they were thought to be incapable of carrying out religious practice over many kalpas. Or though it had been stated that for the first time they conceived the desire to do so, they can attain enlightenment. This was indicated as a possibility in name only, with no actual examples to support it, prior to the Dragon King's daughter in the 10th chapter of the Lotus Sutra. So, in effect, the attainment of Buddhahood by women was denied. It was only theoretical. There were no actual examples of it. Thus, even a woman who was in the realm of heaven, of human or heavenly beings, had no hope of ever finding the way to become a Buddha. How much less hope was there for this woman described in the Lotus Sutra, a humble being born among the creatures known as dragons, who had not yet reached maturity, but was only 8 years old, and yet, contrary to all expectations, through the instruction of Manjushri, in the short space of time between the teacher of the law and the Devadatta chapters, when the Buddha was preaching the Treasure Tower chapter, she attained Buddhahood in the midst of the ocean. This was a most wonderful happening. If it had not been for the power of the Lotus Sutra, the foremost among all the teachings of the Buddha's lifetime, how could such a thing have come about? Therefore, Myolo remarks of the event, the sutra here demonstrates its power by revealing that practice is shallow. The sutra here demonstrates its power by revealing that practice is shallow, but the benefit that results is profound indeed. And because the dragon girl was able to attain Buddhahood through this sutra, how could she ever abandon someone who is a practitioner of the Lotus Sutra, even if she had not been admonished, against it by the Buddha? Therefore, in the verse that she uttered in praise of the Buddha, she stated, "I unfold the doctrines of the great vehicle to rescue living beings from suffering." Okay, so in other words, she attained Buddhahood and immediately said, "I unfold the doctrines of the great vehicle of the law to rescue living beings from suffering." She immediately, for the sake of all others, all right, her Buddhahood, right? That was the whole point. She didn't I finally got to be a Buddha. She immediately, first thing she does, for the sake of all others. Her oath was the oath taken by her retinue, or all the creatures known as dragons, whose number is so vast that the mouth cannot express it, the mind cannot fathom it. The dragon king Sagara, though a lowly creature, or that could be Sagara, though a lowly creature cared profoundly for his daughter. Therefore, he took the foremost treasure in all of the great ocean, a wish-granting jewel, and had his daughter present it as alms to the Buddha in recognition of the fact that she had attained Buddhahood in her present form. This jewel was equivalent in value to a major world system. Devadatta, we all know who that's the major bad guy, Devadatta was the grandson of King Simhahanu, the son of Shakyamuni, Buddha's uncle, King Dronodana, and the elder brother of the Venerable Ananda. His mother was a daughter of the rich man Supra Buddha. He was thus a member of the family of a wheel-turning king and held a high social position in the southern continent of Jampadvipa. While he was still an ordinary member of society, the woman he had intended to marry, Yashodhara, was taken away by Prince Siddhartha, and thereafter looked upon Siddhartha as he would an enemy from a past existence. So Shakyamuni and Devadatta were not related. Yeah, they're related by like cousin or something like that.
Yeah, that's what
yes.
I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, by cousin. All right. So he continues on the top of page 342. Later, he broke his own ties with his family and joined the Buddhist order. But when there were large gatherings of human and heavenly beings, the Buddha would censure him. Okay, so Devadatta started out trying out. He would be censured by Shakyamuni, calling him a fool or one who eats the spit of others. Not very complimentary. In addition, being a man who cared deeply about fame and personal profit, he envied the attention that was paid to the Buddha. He then began observing the 5 ascetic practices in an attempt to appear more admirable than the Buddha. He pounded iron to make a 1,000-spoked wheel pattern to imprint on the soles of his feet, gathered together fireflies to form a tuft of white hairs between his eyebrows, and committed to memory 60,000 and 80,000 jeweled teachings. He erected an ordination platform on Mount Gayashirasha and lured many of the Buddha's disciples over to his side. He smeared poison on his fingernails and thus attempted to poison the feet of the Buddha. He beat the nun Utpalavarna to death and rolled a huge rock down on the Buddha, injuring the latter on the toe. He was guilty of committing 3 cardinal sins and in the end gathered about him all the evil men of the 5 regions of India and strove to harm the Buddha and his disciples and lay supporters. King Bimbisara was the foremost of the Buddha's lay supporters. Each day he dispatched 500 carriages day after day, supplying alms to the Buddha and his disciples. But Devadatta, driven by his intense jealousy, talked to Prince Ajatashatru and in time persuaded him to attack his father, King Bimbisara. Whereupon he pinned the king down with 7-foot-long spikes. In the end, the earth in front of the northern gate of the capital city of Rajagira split open, and Devadatta fell into the great citadel of the Avicii hell. There was not a single being in the entire major world system who did not witness the event. One would suppose that as a result of he just laid out all this shit that Devadatta did that made him a superiorly, incredibly evil person, somebody that should be able to make no advance, all right? Now he goes on, the Daishonin goes on to say, one would suppose that as a result, Devadatta would never be able to escape the great citadel of hell of incessant suffering, even though as many kalpas should pass as there are the dust particles of the land. And yet, amazing as it is, and admirable as well, in the Lotus Sutra, he became a thus come one called Heavenly King. And if Devadatta could become a Buddha, then all the countless other evil people who were enticed by him, maybe one of them is me, since they shared with him the same karmic cause and effect, must surely have been able to escape from the pains of the hell of incessant suffering. This is entirely due to the benefit and blessings of the Lotus Sutra. Thus, Devadatta and all the countless persons who attended him now dwell in the house of the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra in order to protect them. What a comforting thought! The various Bodhisattvas, who were as numerous as the dust particles of the land, had advanced to the level of near perfect enlightenment, which means that they had freed themselves of all but their fundamental darkness. When they were fortunate enough to encounter the thus come one Shakyamuni, they thought that they would be able to smash this great boulder of fundamental darkness. But in the first 40 and more years of his preaching life, Shakyamuni, the Lord of Teaching, said that while he could explain the causes of enlightenment, he could not explain its effects. Therefore, he did not make clear to them the benefits of perfect enlightenment. Hence, not a single one of them could advance to the stage of perfect enlightenment. This was contrary to their expectations. But during the 8 years when he preached at Eagle Peak, in other words, all of his preaching prior to the Lotus Sutra, that was the deal. But when he got to the Lotus Sutra, during the 8 years when he preached at Eagle Peak, the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha revealed the effects of enlightenment, which are called the one vehicle of Buddhahood. All of the Bodhisattvas thus advanced to the stage of perfect enlightenment, so that their enlightenment was equal to that of Shakyamuni thus come one, was equal to that of Shakyamuni thus come one. It was as though they had climbed to the very top of Mount Sumeru and could see in all four directions. All became bright and clear, as though the sun had appeared in the midst of a long night. Even if the Buddha had not instructed them to do so, could they have failed to resolve to spread the teachings of the Lotus Sutra, or to take it upon themselves to the sufferings of its practitioners? Could any of them, once they became Buddhas, not behave as a Buddha? Therefore, they made a vow saying, we care nothing for our bodies or lives, because we're hip to the fact we're just going to come back, but are anxious only for the unsurpassed way, which unlocks our ability to become teachers. Never begrudging our lives, our bodies or lives, because they're secondary to understanding the truth. Therefore, second paragraph, page 343, therefore they made a vow, saying, we care nothing for our bodies or lives, but are anxious only for the unsurpassed way, to understand the correct teaching. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the unsurpassed way. Never begrudging our bodies or lives, or we will preach this sutra far and wide. So we're Bodhisattvas of the earth. We are supposed to be doing exactly what this is talking about. That's why Nichiren's teaching it to us in this Gosho. Furthermore, Shakyamuni Buddha, who is like a kind father, Many Treasures Buddha, who is like a loving mother, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions who appeared in order to add their testimony, and who are like affectionate parents, which is just like a mother or a father, right, were assembled together so that it was as though 2 moons had come together, or 2 suns had appeared side by side. At that time, the Buddha spoke 3 times in warning, saying, I say to the great assembly, after I have passed into extinction, who can guard and uphold, read and recite this sutra? Now in the presence of the Buddha, let him come forward and speak his vow. Then the great Bodhisattvas who filled 410,000 million nayutas of lands in each of the 8 directions bent their bodies, bowed their heads, and pressed their palms together, and all raised their voices in unison, saying, "We will respectfully carry out all these just as the Thus Come One has commanded." 3 times they carried out, not sparing their voices. 3 times they cried out, not sparing their voices, "Let us, let us." How then could they fail to take it upon themselves the sufferings of the practitioners of the Lotus Sutra? Fan Yu Chi gave his head to Chin Ko-o, and Chi Chu hung his sword on the grave of the Lord of Su. In both cases, they acted to do so to not go back on the promises they had made. To not go back on the promises they had made. To not go back on the promises they had made. Because, folks, this is saying we have all made some promises, and it's very important for us to become aware and to remember them and to not fail to uphold those promises. This is so key. That's why I'm reading it to you. It's very complex. It's a little dry, but this is a sutra by Nichiren. Fan Yu Chi gave his head to Chin Ko-o, and Chi Chua hung his sword on the grave of the Lord Su. In both cases, they acted so not as to go back on the promises they had made. If even though these persons of China, a land far from the birthplace of Buddhism, could, because of a promise made to a friend, sacrifice their own lives or hang on a grave a sword that meant more to them than life itself, then how much more can one expect from the great Bodhisattvas, who from the first have been beings of great compassion and have taken profound vows to undergo suffering on behalf of others? How could they ever cast aside the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra, even if the Buddha had not admonished them against doing so? What is more, it was through the Lotus Sutra that these bodhisattvas attained Buddhahood. And because the Buddha fervently admonished them concerning it, they took solemn vows in the presence of the Buddha. There can be no doubt, therefore, that they will aid its practitioners. The Buddha is the sovereign of the human and heavenly realm and the parent of all living beings. Moreover, he is the teacher who leads and opens the way. Though one may be a parent, if of humble station, one cannot at the same time assume the role of sovereign. And though one may be a sovereign, if not also a parent, one may inspire fear. And though one may be both a parent and sovereign, one cannot be a teacher as well. The various Buddhas, other than Shakyamuni, since they are known as world honor ones, may be regarded as sovereigns. But since they do not make their appearance in this Sahe world, like us, bodhisattvas of the earth, they are not teachers. Right. I'll say it again. The various Buddhas other than Shakyamuni, since they are known as world-honored ones, may be regarded as sovereigns. But since they do not make their appearance in the Sahe world, they are not teachers, nor do they declare that the living beings in it, the threefold world, are all my children. Thus, Shakyamuni Buddha alone fulfills the 3 functions of sovereign, teacher, and parent. Nevertheless, during the first 40 and more years of his preaching life, Shakyamuni cursed Devadatta, censured the various voice hearers, and refused to teach the bodhisattvas the doctrines pertaining to the fruits of enlightenment. Though people did not actually say so to others, sometimes they wondered in their hearts whether this Buddha was not, in fact, Papias, the devil king of the 6th heaven. So greatly did he trouble them. They're talking about Shakyamuni. They continued to harbor these doubts for 40 and more years until the preaching of the Lotus Sutra began. So in other words, They listened to Shakyamuni, they adhered to his teaching, they continued to give him alms, they followed him around, but he never cut him any slack. He never told them what they were really there to want to know. Okay? To the point that they kind of question, what's your real intent? The real intent was that he had to preach all of this stuff before he could get to the Lotus Sutra, because the Lotus Sutra isn't his. Don't forget, in the Lotus Sutra, it talks about his father already preaching the Lotus Sutra when he was the 16th son of the great universal wisdom excellence Buddha. The Lotus Sutra precedes Shakyamuni. In reality, the Lotus Sutra is the living eternal Buddha. It is the law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It is one with the life of Nichiren and all the Bodhisattvas of the earth that have taken as their teacher the original teacher and the original law. Okay? I just said that as a synopsis of what's going on, but that's why it's saying what it's saying. They continued to harbor these doubts for 40 and more years until the preaching of the Lotus Sutra began. By then, during the 8 years at Eagle Peak, when he was preaching the Lotus Sutra, the treasure tower appeared in the air, and the two Buddhas sat side by side, him and many treasures in it, like the sun and the moon. The various other Buddhas ranged themselves over the ground like so many great mountains gathered together, and the Bodhisattvas who had emerged from the earth, as numerous as the dust particles of 1,000 worlds, ranged themselves in the air like so many stars, and the Buddha revealed the blessings that the various Buddhas enjoy as the result of their enlightenment. It was as though a storehouse of treasures had been unlocked and its contents presented to poor people. Sorry. Or as though the Kunlun Mountains, with all their riches, had broken open. During these 8 years, the people who were present at the assembly became profoundly aware of the rarity and wonder of these events. It was as if they were gathering up nothing but gems. The Bodhisattvas, unbegrudging of their lives, unstinting with their words, vowed to do as the Buddha had encouraged them. Then, in the entrustment chapter, the thus come one Shakyamuni emerged from the treasure tower and closed its doors. The various other Buddhas thereupon returned to their respective lands, and the Bodhisattvas who had appeared with them followed along in company with the Buddhas. The people were feeling increasingly lonely when the Buddha announced, 3 months from now I will enter nirvana. The announcement astounded them and made them feel even more forlorn. Having heard the Lotus Sutra, the Bodhisattvas, persons of the two vehicles, and other human and heavenly beings were all imbued with a deep sense of gratitude for the Buddha's compassion and wanted to show the Buddha how willing they were to sacrifice their bodies and lives for the sake of the Lotus Sutra. How terrible it would be, they thought, their hearts in a turmoil, if the Buddha were to really enter nirvana as he said he would. At the same time, on the 15th day of the second month, during the hour of the tiger and the hour of the hare, 3 to 7 a.m., when the Buddha was 80 years old on the bank of the Jitavati River in the city of Kushinagara in the country of Shravasta in eastern India, the Buddha's voice was heard announcing that he would pass into extinction. His voice radiated upward as far as the summit of being heaven and echoed abroad throughout the entire major world system. Eyes grew dim and hearts sank. From throughout the 5 regions of India, its 16 great states, its 500 middle states, its 10,000 small states, and its countless smaller states, scattered about like grains of millet, the people gathered together, none having had time to prepare clothing or food, and without distinction as to class or status. Oxen and horses, wolves and dogs, eagles and vultures, gnats and gadflies, to the number of 52 different species also gathered together. Those of any one species were as numerous as the dust particles of the land, to say nothing of the number of all 52 species together. Pardon me. Pardon me. All of these different species of beings brought flowers, incense, clothing, and food as their last offerings to the Buddha. Their voices resounded, crying out that the jeweled bridge for all living beings was about to collapse, that the eye of all living beings was about to be put out, that the parent, sovereign, and teacher of all living beings was about to pass away. Not only did their hair stand on end, but their tears flowed. Not only did their tears flow, but they beat their heads, pressed their hands to their chest, and cried aloud, not sparing their voices. The blood of their tears and the blood of their sweat fell upon Kunshinagara more heavily than a torrential rain, and flowed more abundantly than a mighty river. All this they did solely because of the Lotus Sutra. All this they did solely because the Lotus Sutra had opened for them the way to Buddhahood, and they could never repay the debt of gratitude they owed the Buddha. Even in this sense of grief, there were those who declared angrily that the enemies of the Lotus Sutra should have their tongues cut out, that they should never be allowed to sit with others in the assembly. Bodhisattva Kashyapa vowed that he would appear in the form of frost and hail in the lands of the enemies of the Lotus Sutra. At that time, the Buddha raised himself slightly from his reclining position, praised him, saying happily, "Well spoken, well spoken." The other bodhisattvas, guessing where the Buddha's wishes lay, supposed that if they declared their intentions to attack the enemies of the Lotus Sutra, this might prolong the Buddha's life a little, and one by one they vowed to do so. In this way, the bodhisattvas and the heavenly and human beings called upon the enemies of the Lotus Sutra to appear, hoping that if they could fulfill their oath they had taken in the presence of the Buddha, then Shakyamuni Buddha as well as many treasures, and the other Buddhas and thus come ones would understand that, faithful to the vow they had made before the Buddha, they would begrudge neither their reputations nor their lives in defense of the Lotus Sutra. Okay, so did you understand what that just said? Let me reread that one, because we're getting to that part where I said, from long ago, from the very beginning of my practice, I had this memorized. This was a passage that was taught to us before this whole Gosha was translated. Okay, so Kashyapa is like pissed off and talking about the people that have slandered or have opposed the Buddha. The rest of the disciples that have now had the way open to them because of the preaching of the Lotus Sutra all go, maybe if I make the same kind of declarative as Kashyapa, we can get the Buddha to last a little longer. So they all declare that they're gonna go bash all the enemies of Lotus Sutra. All the enemies, anybody went the wrong way, they're gonna see fit to make them right. Okay. And the important thing for them is that Shakyamuni understand that they've made a vow to not begrudge their lives, to defend this teaching, to defend the law, right, no matter what, in any lifetime, in every lifetime. Okay, and so Daishonin is saying now, as he's talking to Sairenbo, okay, and he's explained all of this stuff about protective influence. This prayers are answered. The protective influence is not only coming from your life, but the inseparability of your life to all other Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, cause awakened ones, hearing voice hearers. Okay. Says, and so he's now saying to Sairenbo now. Okay, so we all know what the world's like in this moment, though. So that Daishonin is saying, and one may ask to Sairenbo, and one may ask why the results of these vows, if all these vows of protection have already taken place and these dudes are in place to protect, why haven't they come forth? One may ask why the results of these vows should be so long in appearing. And the Daishonin says, it doesn't freaking matter. That's what his answer actually is. It's that they happen now based on you. That's what's important. So, one may ask why the results of these vows should be so long in appearing, and yet, though one might point at the earth and miss it, though one might bind up the sky, though the tides might cease to ebb and flow and the sun rise in the west. All impossibilities. It could never come about that the prayers of the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra would go unanswered. He says it very clearly, though. It could never come about that the prayers of the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra would go unanswered. If the Bodhisattvas, the human and heavenly beings, the 8 kinds of non-human beings, all the people we've already just been talking about, the 2 sages, the 2 heavenly deities, the 10 demon daughters would by some unlikely chance fail to appear and protect the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra, then above them they would be showing disdain for Shakyamuni and the other Buddhas, and below they would be guilty of deceiving the beings of the 9 realms who they've already promised to be there for. It makes, this is my favorite part, I guess I put this in that one one. It makes no difference. So this isn't about the good being better and the bad being worse. This is about your faith, not your moment of life. Okay, your moment of life is based on faith, not what causes you've made. Because if your moment of life is correct, your causes will be diminished or eradicated. So again, this is the point. Yeah. Bottom of page, next to last paragraph on page 345. It makes no difference if the practitioner himself is lacking in worth, defective in wisdom, impure in his person, and lacking in virtue derived from observing the precepts. So long as he chants Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, they will invariably protect him. One does not throw away gold because the bag that holds it is dirty. One does not ignore the sandalwood trees because of the foul odor of the aranda trees around them. And one does not refuse to gather lotuses because the pond in the valley where they grow is not clean. If they ignore the practitioner of the Lotus Sutra, they will be going against their vow. Now that the former and middle days of the law are over, persons who observe the precepts are as rare as tigers in a marketplace, and persons of wisdom are harder to find than the horns of a qilin. Qilin. Yeah. Good. See, you should have been doing all these Mandarin pronunciations all along. While waiting for the moon to rise, one must rely upon a lantern, and when there are no true gems at hand, gold and silver must serve as jewels. The debt of gratitude one owes to a white crow may be repaid to a black crow, and the debt one owes to a sage priest may be repaid to an ordinary priest. So, if you earnestly pray that blessings be given to you without delay, how can your prayers fail to be answered? Question: when I examine the reasoning and the textual proof you have presented above, I would have to say that if there are a sun and a moon in the sky, if there are plants and trees on the earth, if there are day and night in this country of ours, then so long as the earth fails to turn upside down and the tides of the ocean continue to ebb and flow, there can be no doubt that the prayers of those who put forth faith in the Lotus Sutra, in Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, will be answered in this world, and that they will enjoy good circumstances in their next existence. Nevertheless, during the past 20 years and more, the eminent leaders of the Tendai and True Word schools have in many cases offered prayers regarding important matters of state, but such prayers have by no means proved effective. Indeed, the prayers of these priests would seem to be even less effective than those of persons who support the teachings of non-Buddhist scriptures. This sets me to wondering if the pronouncements of the Lotus Sutra are in some way false, if the actions of the practitioners of the sutra are not to blame, or if the time or the people's capacity is not appropriate for such actions. And this puts me in doubt regarding my future existence. But leaving that point aside for the moment, I am told that you were a disciple of the priests on Mount Hei. That they say that the offenses of the fathers are visited upon the sons, and those of the teachers are visited upon the disciples. When the priests of Mount Hei burned the halls and pagodas of Onjo-ji Temple and of the Mountain Temple, along with the thousands and 10,000s of Buddhist images and sutras, those were terrible deeds. They threw the people of the time into turmoil and turned them against Mount Hei. What is your opinion? I have heard a little about these events in the past, but I would like to now hear you speak in greater detail. I am full of questions. When priests behave in such an evil manner, it seems to me that they are no longer acting in accord with the spirit of the three treasures, and that heaven and earth should no longer lend them shelter. I would suppose, therefore, that their prayers would not go answered. What is your opinion? I have touched on this matter in the past, but this time I will summarize the issues. This is a matter of vital concern to the country of Japan, and because people fail to understand it, they create negative karma through their words. First of all, as to the origin of the temple on Mount Hei, it was founded by the great teacher Dengyo. I was going to try to explain this, and he's going to. All right. First of all, as to the origin of the temple on Mount Hei, it was founded by the great teacher Dengyo. Kobo is the one that did the Onoji. In the reign of Emperor Kamu, some 200 years after Buddhism was introduced to this country. Earlier, Prince Shotoku had declared that Kyoto, which was later to become the capital, appeared to be highly suitable for the royal residence, but the actual founding of the capital at that location was delayed until after the Tendai school had been introduced to Japan. According to the records of the Prince Jogu or Shotoku, the prince stated, 200 or more years after my passing, the Buddhist law will spread throughout Japan. Later in the Inraku era, the great teacher Dengyo founded the temple on Mount Hei, and Emperor Kamu established the capital Heian-kyo. Thus, the prophecy of Prince Shotoku was fulfilled. In this way, the mountain temple and the royal house were like pine and cypress and resembled the orchids and the grasses. When the pine withers, the cypress too is bound to wither. And when the orchids wilt, the grasses wilt as well. Thus, it seemed that the prosperity of the royal reign brought joy to the mountain temple, and that the decline of royal power brought sadness to the mountain. And now that the world has changed and power has passed to the government in the Kanto region, what must be their thoughts? In the third year of the Jokyu era, the year of the cyclical sign Kanoto Mi, on the 19th day of the fourth month, around the time of the disturbance between the court and the barbarian warriors, by command of the retired emperor of Oki, altars were set up and 15 secret ceremonies were carried out for the first time by 41 practitioners of such secret ceremonies in an attempt to overcome the Kanto government through the power of incantation. These ceremonies included the one-character gold wheel ceremony carried out by the administrator of priests Jian, the Tendai chief priest, and 12 attendants priests at the command of the imperial regent Motomichi. The ceremony of the four heavenly kings, carried out by the imperial administrator of priests of the Jokoji temple, Shinsho, with 8 attendant priests at Hirose Palace and, at the command of Lady Shu Meimon-in. The ceremony of the wisdom king, immovable, carried out by the administrator of priests Joho and 8 accompanying priests of the command at the command of Lord Kanzain Zinmon Fujiwara Teda Tsune. The great awesome virtue ceremony carried out by the administrator of priests Kangon with 8 accompanying priests at the command of Lady Shichi Join. The ceremony of the wheel turning king, carried out by the administrator of priest Jokin with 8 accompanying priests at the command of the same person as above. The 10 altar great awesome virtue ceremony, carried out by 10 priests, the administrator of priests Kakucho, the Dharma seal Shunsho, the Dharma seal Eshin, the Dharma seal Goen, the supervisor of priest Yuen, the administrator of priest Jikin, the supervisor of priest Kinjo, the supervisor of priest Sinsan, the supervisor of priest Gyohen, and the Dharma I Jikaku, along with the 6 attendant priests, each carried out for the most part at the main temple building. The ceremony of the wish-granting wheel carried out by the administrators of priests Myokoin with 8 accompanying priests at the command of Lady Gishumoni, and the ceremony of the heavenly king Vaisravana carried out by the administrator of priests Jojuin Reelson of Mii with 6 accompanying priests at the command of Shichin. So again, when this disturbance broke out, these ceremonies were all carried out by the people that he's ascribed them to. This is a part of the imperial record of history of Japan. So the Daishonin is saying, look at all the dudes that prayed for the imperial family and not a thing happened. They lost. Okay? That's what this was all about. He's just like saying, look at all these priests' prayers of all these schools of the Buddhist teachings, and not a single one had the efficacy of protecting anybody. All right? I'll continue. Bottom page 347, and we're almost done, guys. We're within a couple of pages of finishing. And there were also objects of devotion, bottom paragraph, page 347. And there were also objects of devotion that were fashioned in a single day. The secret ceremonies based on them included the ceremony of the wisdom king craving filled of the prescribed method carried out by the head of the Nina temple in Shishinden Palace from the 3rd day of the 5th month and for the following 14 days. The ceremony of the Buddha eye carried out by the administrative priest Daijo for 21 days. The ceremony of the 6 characters carried out by the supervisor of priest Kaiga. The ceremony of the wisdom king craving filled carried out by the administrator of priest Kangon for 7 days. The ceremony of immovable carried out by Kanjuji temple's administrator of priests with 8 accompanying priests, all holding supervisory posts in the priesthood. The great awesome virtue ceremony carried out by the administrator of priest Aki, and the ceremony of the boy diamond pounder carried out by the same person. This completes the list of the 15 ceremonies performed before altars. On the 15th day of the 5th month, Igataro Hogan Mitsuuse was attacked and defeated in the capital. On the 19th day of the same month, word of this reached Kamakura. When the news arrived at the capital that a large force of troops had been dispatched on the 21st day to attack the capital, the remainder of the ceremonies were performed, beginning on the 8th day of the 6th month. These consisted of the ceremony of the Honorable Star King, performed by the administrator of priest Kakucho, the ceremony of the Wisdom King Great Commander, performed by the supervisor of priest Sao, the ceremony of the 5 altars, performed by the administrator of priest Daijo, the Dharma Seal Eshin, the supervisor of priest Zinsan, the supervisor of priest Yuen, the supervisor of priest Gyo Hen, and the ceremony of the Protection Sutra presided over by the head of Ninaji. It was the 2nd time this ceremony was performed in our country. On the 21st day of the 5th month, and what he's basically saying is no other prayer works in the latter day of the law other than chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. That's what he's really getting to if you wonder why is he filling all this in? He's discrediting every other way to try and get there other than his teaching. Okay, frankly. Bottom of page 348, last paragraph. On the 21st day of the 5th month, the governor of Musashi started for the capital on Tokaido Road, while the leader of the Genji clan of Kai set out on the Tosando Road, and Lord Shikibu advanced via the Hokuriku Road. On the 5th day of the 6th month, the defending forces at Otsu were defeated by the Genji of Kai. On the 13th and 14th days of the 6th month, the 2 sides engaged in the battle at Uji Bridge. On the 14th, the defenders of the capital suffered defeat. And on the 15th day of the same month, the governor of Musashi entered the Rokujo headquarters along with his men. On the 11th day of the 7th month, the retired Emperor Gotoba was banished to the island province of Oki. The retired Emperor Tsuchimikado was banished to the province of Awa. The retired Emperor Juntoku was banished to the island province of Sado. In addition, 7 members of the court were put to death. The great evil doctrine of these ceremonies, which I went override here, he just spelled every single one of them out, who did them, what they were doing. The great evil doctrine of these ceremonies over the years steadily made its way to the Kanto region, where it was embodied in the superintendents or attendant priests of various temples who repeatedly performed these ceremonies. The performance of these ceremonies from the beginning could not distinguish between correct and erroneous teachings, between superior and inferior doctrines, but assumed that it was sufficient merely to revere the 3 treasures. So without a thought, they employed these ceremonies, and now not only the provinces of Kanto, but the chief priests and superintendents of Mount Hei, Toji, and Onoji have all come under the jurisdiction of the Kanto authorities, so that, as a result, the latter are in the position of supporting these ceremonies. Question: why do you insist upon referring to the true word teaching as an incorrect doctrine? Answer: and that would be any esoteric teaching, including Tibetan Buddhism, for all you esoterics. Why do you insist upon referring to the true word teaching as an incorrect doctrine? The great teacher Kobo has stated the Mahavajrana Sutra is first, the Flower Garland Sutra is second, and the Lotus Sutra is third. But one should examine this ranking carefully. In what sutra did the Buddha discuss the relative worth of these 3 sutras and deliver this judgment? If there is in fact a sutra that declares that the Mahavajrana Sutra ranks first and the Flower Garland second and the Lotus third, then we should accept that sutra as that statement is true. But if there is no such passage, then it is not possible to accept this assertion. The Lotus Sutra states, Medicine King, now I say to you, I have preached various sutras, and among these sutras, the Lotus is the foremost. Here the Buddha is referring to all the teachings that he has expounded and stated that among these, the Lotus ranks in first place. The Buddha's preaching and the writings of the great teacher Kobo are as much at variance with each other as fire and water. We should investigate and clarify this matter. Over a period of several hundred years, ordinary priests and high-ranking priests have studied the writings of Kobo. The eminent and humble, high and low, have put their faith in them and honored the Mahavajrana Sutra as the foremost among all the sutras. That's the premier true word sutra, by the way. This does not accord with the intention of the Buddha. Throughout, a thoughtful person should examine the matter with great care, for if we put faith in writings that do not accord with the intention of the Buddha, how can we hope to attain Buddhahood? And if we follow such writings in offering prayers for the nation, how can we fail to bring about misfortune? Moreover, Kobo writes the Buddhist teachers of China vied with one another to steal the ghee. The meaning of this statement is that the great teacher Tentai and others stole the ghee of the true word teachings and called it the ghee of the Lotus Sutra. This statement is the most important point. What a slander! When the great teacher Tentai applied the simile of ghee to the Lotus Sutra, basing himself on a passage in the Nirvana Sutra, he declared that among all the sutras, the Lotus Sutra is worthy to be compared to ghee. It was clarified butter. The true word teaching was introduced to China from India 200 years or more after the time of Tentai. How then could Tentai possibly have stolen the ghee of the true word teaching and called it the ghee of the Lotus Sutra? Of all strange events, this would be the strangest. What evidence is there then for calling persons who lived 200 years or more before the true word teaching was even introduced to China thieves? Or are we to put faith in these writings of the great teacher Kobo, or are we to put faith in the Nirvana Sutra where the Buddha likens the Lotus Sutra to ghee? If we are to regard the great teacher Tentai as a thief, then how are we to interpret this passage in the Nirvana Sutra? And if we accept the passage in the Nirvana Sutra as reliable and conclude that the writings of Kobo are incorrect, then what are we to think of people who put faith in such erroneous teachings? All I can say is that one should compare the writings of the great teacher Kobo and the pronouncements of the Buddha, and then put one's faith in the one that proves to be correct. That's how the Daishonin teaches us all to always know what the truth is. Read the teaching. Chant Daimoku about it. Come to your own conclusions. Don't think because it says in a book this. Okay? The time is constantly changing. You are a Buddha exactly as you are. None of this is over your head, but you have to do all the things that will prepare and bring forth that reality of that original state. I'm at the end. Question. I am still in doubt. The Mahavajrana Sutra represents the teaching expounded by the thus come one Mahavajrana. And if that is so, then to use the teaching expounded by Shakyamuni Buddha to attempt to controvert the teachings expounded by the thus come one Mahavajrana is surely not at all in accord with reason, is it? Answer. Who were the parents of the thus come one Mahavajrana? And in what country did he appear when he expounded the Mahavajrana Sutra? Even if he had simply appeared in the world without parents, then in what sutra is it mentioned that such a Buddha would appear in the world to expound his teachings during the 5,670 million years between the passing of Shakyamuni Buddha and the appearance of Maitreya, the compassionate honored one? And if there are no passages of proof, then who would put faith in such an assertion? The true word doctrines are full of mistaken assertions of this kind, which is why I spoke of them as an erroneous teaching. The list of errors is all but inexhaustible. I have done no more than give one or two examples. In addition to the true word, the authorities rely on the Zen and Nimbutsu schools. These doctrines all represent provisional teachings of the type set forth before the truth had been fully revealed. They are not the tenets that lead to the attainment of Buddhahood, but rather will create karma that condemns one to the hell of incessant suffering. Persons who practice them are guilty of slandering the law, so how could their prayers possibly be answered? One who is a ruler of a nation has become so because in the past he upheld the correct teaching and served the Buddha. It is through the calculations of the heavenly kings Brahma and Shakra, the gods of the sun and the moon, the four heavenly kings and others, that all rulers, great and small, succeed in acquiring their districts and domains. Thus the sutra says, now when I use the 5 types of vision to clearly perceive the 3 existences, I see that in the past existences, all the rulers served 500 Buddhas, and that is the reason they were able to become emperors and sovereigns. But if one turns one's back on the Lotus Sutra and follows the erroneous teachers of the true word, Zen, and Nimbutsu schools, then although one may carry out all kinds of good deeds, precepts, they will never accord. These will never accord with the will of the Buddha and go against the intentions of the gods. One should give very careful thought to this matter because your prayer will be then impacted, right? So it is a rare thing to be born as a human being. And if, having been born as such, you do not do your best to distinguish between the correct doctrine and the incorrect, so that in the future you may attain Buddhahood, then you are certainly not fulfilling your true worth as a human being. Let me reread this. As it is a rare thing to be born as a human being, and if, having been born as such, you do not do your best to distinguish. So you must study. You must ascertain the truth based on reading or listening to the teaching, not basing it on Joe Blow saying this because that's what they think. If they can't back it up because it's in the sutra, it's in the teaching, it's their opinion. You should be very careful about accepting other people's opinions. All right? You do not do it, and if having been born as such, you do not do your best to distinguish between the correct doctrine and the incorrect, so that in the future you may attain Buddhahood. And that's why you do it. You do it in order to attain Buddhahood. Then you are certainly not fulfilling your true worth as a human being, because you should become the Buddha. Moreover, after the great teacher Jikaku had visited China, he turned against the doctrines of his original teacher, the great teacher Dingyo, and worked to spread the true word doctrines on Mount Hei. In order to do so, he offered up prayers and claimed that as a result, he had had a dream in which he shot an arrow at the sun and caused the sun to roll over and over. And for more than 400 years now, people have all looked upon this as an auspicious dream. But in a country such as Japan, it is in fact a dream of particularly ill omen. This is the land of the rising sun, right? King Chao of the Yin dynasty shot an arrow at the sun, and as a result he perished. Even though this dream is a matter associated with the reincarnation of a Buddha, you should ponder it very carefully. Is it really a good sign that the sun would... Okay. He mentions this in other goshas, the reason I'm talking about it. In response to your questions, what I have touched on here is a mere hair from the hides of 9 head of cattle. In other words, there's a lot more to understanding that what goes into the efficacy of prayer than what I've discussed here. But if you don't understand what I've discussed here, you're going to be underestimating the truth of what's at stake, which is absolute faith in the correct teaching of the latter day, which only comes from Nichiren. Thank you, everybody.